Casey the Beef creaking for the 38th time in 39 weeks. I find myself talking to you on Wednesday, 6:30 my time, 7:30 your time. Probably the biggest show in our esteemed Long's history tonight. Dan Hope coming up to talk draft and maybe a little Ohio State and Clemson, NFL draft, I should say. And then we have our buddy, Jason Priester, allclemson.com. Come on, talk about Cade Klubnik and everything happening in Clemson, which most recently happened was a really not so good basketball game we just watched.
Yeah, it wasn't good, but it put me in a worse mood than I already am. But I think that's good for the show. That's good for tonight. Excited to have Dan Hope back. I'm it'll be his third visit with us, and JP too. So they're tied for the lead. It's apropos that they're on the same episode, but it's nice to be able to talk some NFL draft and talk some Clemson guys, some Ohio State guys with Dan, and of course it's great always to talk Clemson with JP. So and hello to Kevron.
Yeah, Kevron checks in first almost every week. Kevron, hope you're doing well. Thank you for checking in. Hey, we had pretty normal weather here in Texas this week. So I got nothing to report on the weather front. No weather stories this week. We had electricity the entire week. Got down to 35 or so, but we can deal with that here, just not the -6s.
What are our fans going to do? We're not talking weather. We're not the weather guys this week, you know?
No joke. I see you got a Miami Dolphins shirt on. I think we'll be talking about that later. What's the hat? I can't see the hat.
It's the Hartford Whalers. It has no affiliation to anything that we do. It's a now defunct NHL hockey team. I've worn it before, I think, and a couple of our friends have talked about it. Rich has talked about it out there in Arizona, how they're the Carolina Hurricanes now.
Ah, okay. Yeah, I got the old I'm doing a recycle too, the Seabrook Island shirt because I want to get back there someday. And I always, when I think of that, I think of, 95 degrees, the sunshine and the beach, the beautiful beach of South Carolina, which I do miss here in Texas. The beaches are okay. They're not the same as Seabrook, Hilton Head, and Defusky Island as I'm sure you're well aware. Clemson basketball struggled a little bit today, and maybe we'll get in a little more of this with JP. But, man, while we wait for Dan Hope to join us here in a couple of minutes, they just I don't know what – look lethargic. Is that the right word, lethargic? My 14-year-old will say they look like they didn't care. I'm grown up enough to know that they do care, but sometimes you just don't have your A game. So that appeared to be it today because – I was joking on Twitter the first one to 21 was going to win that game because it was like 11-8 at the 10-minute mark or something.
God, they both shot about under 23% at the half. It was a pillow fight, as we say, and not a good pillow fight. But yeah, they definitely looked lethargic, and this team goes as they're shooting. Now, the defense was not the issue today. There was one possession that I tweeted about that there were 4 offensive rebounds given up in one possession. And every time Syracuse took a 3, every time, and finally the 4th one went down. And that was about the start of the roll for Syracuse. Yeah, I called it. And for the College Sports Network, we do kind of a picks on this tally site website, and I picked it. I picked Syracuse to win. It's not that I didn't want Clemson to win. It's not that I wasn't rooting for him. It wasn't that I was hoping I was wrong. I certainly was. I just kind of had a feeling tonight. I think they're going to come out strong Saturday against Pitt. I think they're going to have a good showing. The defense is going to be there. It was there again tonight. It really was. They definitely need to box out some a little bit more. They definitely need to rebound better on both ends. When they have the chance on the offensive end, they need to put the ball in the hoop, man. God, too many missed layups. Good Lord.
Well, the announcers, weren't the best, but they were better than we got on Saturday on the SEC network for the baseball game, Saturday and Sunday. But he eventually made one of my points, which was if you're going to throw the ball around the perimeter and then check up a 23-footer, you and I talked a little bit before we went live about this, but there was no penetration. There was, think about what I posted on Twitter, Nick Honor creating his own shot last week. There was none of that tonight. It was pass it to 3 guys. Like you were saying before the game, there's no even a fake to go inside. They just pass it a couple times and somebody'd fire up a 24-footer hoping that it would go in, and they did, and it was just sad.
Yeah, and you and I certainly aren't smarter than Brad Brownell. He's
No.
probably, that old cliche, he's forgotten more basketball than we know. However, this is the same team that Clemson beat by about 140 2 weeks ago. This is no different. It's the same zone. It's the same team. They hit a couple more threes tonight than they did in the first round. But it just I don't know. It just didn't click. It didn't click, and I kind of expected it, so I'm not necessarily upset by it. But I did mention to somebody, I said, when Clemson doesn't play well, they leave no doubt. It's never like a 2-point game. Oh, we're not playing well. It's going to be, but it's still close. Like 10 points is deceiving. That was not a 10-point game.
Yeah.
That was closer to a 20-point game.
Yeah, and that's something I rarely do. I was checking Twitter and, getting ready for the show while that game was on, knowing that I had plenty of time before the game was over, but it was really, really over, midway through the second half for sure. They made a little bit of a run there, but
started making shots.
Not much. So Dan Hope's going to be on just a couple minutes, and we're going to talk about the NFL draft. I wanted to talk about not only Clemson, obviously we're going to want to talk about Trevor and Travis. I'm interested in Cornell Powell, and I see you put a couple of names on here too, which or you put one name on there, and then we kind of have a catch-all. And by Dan, let's talk about that we left. Dan works for 11 Warriors, Ohio State site, but in former jobs, well, besides working for orangeandwhite.com for a little while, which is where I met him, he also worked for the Bleacher Report, was an NFL draft guy for the Bleacher Report. And I think I saw on his resume, which you can find online, that he worked for a Buffalo Bills draft site. So a wealth of experience for Dan. He's not just some dude we picked up off the street or we like. We asked him to come back because he knows about the NFL draft. Hopefully he can cut through all the malarkey we're seeing. And I saw you shared some of that today. And I was going to say to Dan, and I probably still will, people trying to make their name, right? They're trying to stand out in the middle of 10,000 mock drafts. So who are you going to remember? The 9,998 people who had Trevor number one, or the one or two people who have Zach Wilson number one? So I think it's all a crock, and I think it's just it's an attention grab until you posted the Chris Sims deal. Chris Sims doesn't need attention. I mean, well, maybe he does, but you know what I'm saying? He's a known commodity. He's a known name. And here he is putting Zach Wilson as number one.
However, he does go for a little wow factor, and one of my favorite broadcasters, I may alienate myself, is Dan Le Batard. And when he was on ESPN Radio, he used to have Sims on there because Sims had a top 10 all-time quarterbacks or something like that, and Le Batard made him go to top 50. So he literally had to go and every week or every day Sims would come on and call. So I think Sims has a little bit of a shock and awe kind of, I don't know, but what I don't get, and I'm going to probably ask Dan too, is Zach Wilson is a good quarterback, and he's 100 years old because he plays at BYU, so he's probably been on 3 mission trips. And
6 kids.
But is he a known commodity? I mean, truly, has he played 3 years on national TV in front of huge crowds and big games like Trevor Lawrence has, and has been kind of anointed for a couple years? And has had the stats. BYU was very good this year, but were they good previous? Was Zach Wilson the standout on the team? I don't understand why they're giving these guys as much hype as they do. Now, I can kind of get sometimes some of the guys talking about Fields because on the big stage he beat Trevor Lawrence and outgunned him, but he wasn't necessarily the same thing. He's not playing against Trevor Lawrence; they're playing against the team, but he's not physically playing against Trevor Lawrence. So, he showed up in the big game. So I get that a little bit. And I'm not even like oh my God, Trevor needs to go first kind of guy. But I just don't understand, at the 11th hour, these guys are coming up with all these hokey reasons as to why they think that Zach Wilson's the number one pick. I just don't understand where it comes from. Well,
you and I said we're not the experts, but we do have an expert with us tonight.
Good segue.
Welcome in. There's Dan Hope from 11warriors.com. Dan, we were talking before. It's your third visit with us. You're like a regular.
I love it. Veteran.
Eventually, we may have to pay you. I've got a coaster here, a seldom used reserve coaster that I'll put in the mail for you. But we appreciate you spending some time with us. When we're talking NFL draft, we thought, who do we know that knows about the NFL draft and can cut through the crap for us? And we thought, Dan Hope.
I'll do my best.
No doubt. Well, before we talk about the NFL draft, as two Clemson guys talking to an Ohio State graduate, we want to say congratulations. The better team that day won. Now, it may anger some of our fans, but that's okay. Casey and I know the better team won that game. So
we said it. We've said it here.
Yeah. Congratulations. Defeated Clemson, and it really wasn't close, and it was hard to watch for us, but congratulations to Dan. Now, the question I have is, we talked about in one of our first visits the sign in the Ohio State locker room. Do you think they focused on that game too much? I mean, it's kind of weird to say they focused on Clemson and not the national championship. It sounds kind of awkward even saying it, but I have to ask. Do you think they were too focused on Clemson?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I'd use the word too focused on Clemson, because I think that was clearly the monkey on their back that they had to get off. And so I think naturally they were really focused on that game, and I think naturally they were built to peak for that game, which they clearly did. And I think that probably did lead to some of a letdown that happened against Alabama. There was also, because of COVID, Ohio State actually only practiced one time before that national championship game in pads. So I think that's another reason why Ohio State really didn't look very good in the national championship game. But I think there's no doubt. Like, I think that the how much they wanted to beat Clemson. I mean, like you said, they were literally talking about that all year long. That was such an emotional high for them that I think it was hard for them to be able to maintain that same level of intensity for another game.
Yeah, it felt from my vantage point that in watching the national championship game, there was a big piece of me from, I guess it was 2018, when Clemson went out to Alabama and spanked them out to California and spanked Alabama. That there was a lot of Alabama talk against Ohio State, and if that team that showed up against Clemson and put a whooping on us showed up against Alabama, not that they were going to win, but that the game was going to be close. And then, the first couple series, defensive backs aren't picking up. I know Devontae Smith's a different animal, but defensive backs aren't picking up. They're out of position. It felt like roles were reversed, and that was the Clemson defense playing Ohio State rather than the Ohio State defense playing Alabama.
Yeah, and you could tell pretty quickly that it was not going to go Ohio State's way. You could just tell they just did not have any answer for what Devontae Smith and Alabama could do.
It was there,
right?
No question.
I don't think anybody had an answer for Devontae Smith. We'll see. We'll see what happens in the NFL, which we'll get to shortly. Our guest is Dan Hope of 11warriors.com. As Casey and I were saying before you came on, Dan, most people know you. Most people listening to this show will know you from orangeandwhite.com. But our friend Brandon Rink turned me on to the fact that you did some work for Bleacher Report and NFL Draft. So we thought we'd get you on and ask you some questions about the Clemson guys. And when you jumped on, what you heard Casey and I talking about was these mock drafts that have someone other than Trevor Lawrence number one. We're Clemson guys. We obviously feel he should be number one. And I think 98 or 99% of the guys who do mock drafts thinks he should be number one. There's always one, right? There's always one at work, always one of the guys out at the bar. There's always one. In your mind, is Trevor number one? Is there any doubt, as someone experienced with the NFL draft?
I don't think there's any doubt that Trevor Lawrence is going to be the number one pick in the draft. It's kind of a natural cycle we see every year with the draft, where the guy who's been hyped up is the number one guy all along. Like, they have to manufacture drama, so you have to start with, is he really the best prospect in the draft? But I mean, if the Jacksonville Jaguars don't select him with the number one pick, I'll be shocked. I mean, you could certainly have an opinion that Zach Wilson's better or Justin Fields is better. I mean, if you have an opinion and can back it up, that's certainly valid. But I don't think there's any question what the Jacksonville Jaguars are going to do.
Yeah, and I said that too just a moment ago, is that, it's okay that for me personally, and I separate me from Marty a little bit, I'm not like the rah-rah Clemson guy. Is it cool? Is it fodder for me to go talk to a South Carolina alum and say that we got a number one draft pick? Yeah, absolutely. Okay, that piece is definitely on the table. However, I'm not the guy that has to have it. It doesn't have to happen, but sometimes it's list season, it feels like. So it's like these guys have to put something out there and conjure up their media guys, right? They want to conjure up a conversation. So if someone has a good reason, awesome, I'll listen to it. And I even said Justin Fields beat the brakes off of Clemson. And so on the national stage in front of multi-millions of people, he looked the part. So if someone came up to me and said, here's what Justin Fields and here's his body of work and here's why, I'll give it some credence. But Zach Wilson plays out west. Is he a good quarterback? Absolutely. I watched him a bunch. He's great. But why does that come up now? But what you just said is you answered that, I guess.
Right. I mean, it's not as interesting to talk for the next 2 months about how Trevor Lawrence is clearly going to be the number 1 overall pick. So
right.
It's more interesting to, make it a debate. But, to me, it's like, let's debate who's going to go number 2 overall, because we really don't know who's going to go number 2 overall. I have no idea what the New York Jets are going to do with that number 2 overall pick. I think it's a lot more interesting to talk about that than to try to pretend like there's any drama with what the Jacksonville Jaguars are going to do.
There really is drama at number 2.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's funny. Go ahead.
Well, I was thinking DJ Uyunglele had the best comment on the draft. He said, I thought there should have only been one team there at Clemson's pro day, and unless the rest of them were there for Cornell Powell to see Cornell. So, and we'll get to Cornell in a minute. Before we get to Cornell, I want to ask you about Travis Etienne. We know the running backs are devalued in the NFL. Very few are selected high. And in your mind, is Travis number 1, or is he somewhere down the line in running backs 2? I've even seen him 3 or even lower than that, I think. First round, into the first round, or later?
I would have him kind of right on that fringe of a first round. I think late first, early second. I think he falls somewhere in that range. To me, he'd be number 2 among the running backs. I'd put Najee Harris from Alabama number 1. I think he's the most complete back in the draft. I think there could be teams that have Etienne higher on their board. I think if he's a guy that some teams might think is a better fit for their offense with, his speed, his receiving ability, it wouldn't shock me if he was the number 1 pick off the board. If it was me, if I was making a pick for a team, I was in the market for a running back, I'd go for Najee Harris because I think he's the most complete running back in the draft, and I think he absolutely should be a first-round pick. But I think Etienne's right on that fringe where if he goes in, the last 5 picks of the first round, that wouldn't surprise me. If he goes somewhere in that first half of the second round, that wouldn't surprise me either.
I wore the Dolphin shirt tonight to try to have it in existence. Put it out there that's where I want Etienne to go. I'm not a diehard anymore, but that's why I wasn't having a heart attack. I was rubbing it while we were talking about Etienne. So that's my hope.
Well, yeah, Casey and I were joking before you jumped on, Dan, about our plan is to get – I'm not even a Dolphins fan, but I live in Texas, but I want Deshaun out of Houston. So get Deshaun and Travis to the Dolphins. But I told Casey to get Deshaun there, the Dolphins are going to have to give up all these draft picks, and Travis is going to have to go in the 6th round or something for that to work out for us. All right, we talked about Cornell Powell a minute or so ago. And he seems to be a high riser with the Senior Bowl and all of the film that's been out there lately, all of the takes on Cornell Powell. Seems to be a hot name relatively, at least when you're in the Clemson world. What's your take on Cornell and where he goes?
Yeah, my feeling is probably, somewhere in the middle rounds of a draft, I would think. My guess would be probably, early in day 3 would probably be my guess. But, great story for Cornell. I mean, he's a guy I remember back when I was on the Clemson beat. He was early in his career, and, his rise this past season, it kind of reminds me of what Terry McLaurin did at Ohio State a couple years ago, where he really didn't do much his first 4 years at Ohio State. And then as a 5th-year senior, he really had that rise, had a great week at the Senior Bowl, ends up going in the 3rd round, and now he's the best receiver for the Washington football team. So could Cornell Powell follow that same trajectory and end up having a great NFL career? Wouldn't surprise me at all.
Yeah, he's a good story for a Clemson fan because he stuck it out, right? Now the thing these days is to transfer somewhere else, which neither Casey or I have a problem with. A lot of fans do. We don't. But he stuck it out, so he's near and dear to a Clemson fan heart. Casey, I'm sorry I cut you off.
No, I was just going to say, without some injuries, does he have the year he has this year? I think he was primed to break out, but without the injuries to Ladson and Ngata and Justin Ross, I mean, he was kind of thrust into the role with Amari Rodgers, and I know that's where we're going next. Amari Rodgers, you spoke a little bit on the Senior Bowl, and I'm going to ask a Senior Bowl question later, but he kind of had a pretty good week there in Alabama. What are your thoughts on Amari going?
Yeah, I like Amari. I mean, it seems like he's probably more in that late round range, but he's a guy that I really like as a slot receiver type player in the NFL. I think he had a really good career at Clemson, and he's another guy. I kind of think like Hunter Renfrow a couple years ago. It wouldn't surprise me if he's a guy a couple years into the league, people are saying, why did he fall as far in the draft as he did? Because I think he's got a really good skill set. I think he's a guy who, his route running ability, his ability to make plays in space, I think his game is going to translate well to the NFL. It doesn't seem like he's projected as that early round pick right now, but if he goes on to have a very productive career at the next level, it wouldn't surprise me.
This is a dumb question, and I'm cutting you off, Marty, but I'm going to ask you a dumb question, Dan, and I know the answer, but I want to ask it. This is a very deep wide receiver class, is it not?
Yeah, I think there's a ton of talent in this wide receiver class. I mean, obviously it starts with Devontae Smith and Jamar Chase, and then you've got Jalen Waddle, Rashad Bateman, Rondale Moore. There's a ton of talent at the wide receiver position in the draft. So I think, to me, like when I look at this draft, I really look at like quarterback and wide receiver. Those are your two like really prime positions in this draft because you've got a lot of guys at both of those positions that are going to go really high.
All right. Dan Hope, 11warriors.com. Anybody else for Clemson, Dan? I don't know why I put Casey up there, but is there anybody else for Clemson that stands out to you that may surprise in the draft, or did we name everybody you see going?
I'll be interested to see where Jackson Carman goes. I mean, he's a guy that Ohio State fans know about as well.
Yes.
And, I think he's a guy, you look at his size, you look at his physical ability. I think he's a really intriguing guy. My feeling is he's a guy that maybe we haven't seen his best football yet. So I'm going to be intrigued to see. My guess is he's probably a late day 2 kind of guy. I'm intrigued to see what kind of career he has in the NFL because certainly he's got a lot of physical ability, had a good career at Clemson. And I think, especially if he, does well at Pro Day and tests really well, I think he's a guy that a lot of NFL teams are going to be intrigued by his upside.
Does he translate to a left tackle in the pros?
That's a good question. I mean, I think, the size, he definitely could. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he ended up as a right tackle or even as a guard at the next level. I think the big question there is going to be just the quickness. Is he quick enough to handle those NFL pass rushers on a consistent basis? I think that's going to be the test of whether he can be that left tackle or whether he's a guy that, has to shift inside. But, you look at in terms of a run blocker, I think he's a guy that can go in and make an impact on an NFL offensive line from day one.
Dan Hope, 11warriors.com. This is Ohio State site. Really good stuff over there, both Case and I. Check it out on a pretty regular basis. Justin Fields, Trevor's compadre in the Georgia high school ranks. Where is he going to end up in this draft? Is he third, fourth quarterback pick? And is that top half of the first round? Where is that for Mr. Fields?
Well, I think he should be the second quarterback of a draft. I really do. My guess is he's going to end up being third because it seems like the momentum right now is towards Zach Wilson being that second guy. But I still think at minimum he's going to be a top 10 pick because somebody of his upside, his level of talent, I saw, a mock draft last week that had him falling to 24th pick, and I thought that was absurd because, I mean, you just look at what he did against Clemson. I mean, and this is a guy who's got a ton of ability, and I'm not saying there's not legitimate questions about him, but I actually made the comparison on my podcast yesterday about it almost reminds me of covering Deshaun Watson 4 years ago when he was going into the NFL draft. And people were so focused on, Clemson hasn't had successful NFL quarterbacks. Is this offense going to translate to the NFL? Making reads, progressions, all that. But if you watch Deshaun Watson play at Clemson, I mean, the guy was clearly a special talent, and I feel the same way about Justin Fields. But I just think the physical skill set, it's right up there, in my opinion, with Trevor Lawrence in terms of a best in the draft. I think Trevor's a little bit more polished in terms of being ready for an NFL offense. But to me, if you're betting on upside, to me, I'm taking Justin Fields over everybody else. I think all 5 of us top guys are going to go high between, Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields, Zach Wilson, Mac Jones, and Trey Lance. I mean, I think they could all go in the top 10. I don't think that's out of the question because I think there's
Wow.
so many teams that need quarterbacks this year that I think the run on those guys is going to be pretty quick because I think there's a pretty big drop off after you get out of that top tier. But I think all 5 of those guys are going to have teams that really want them. And I think top 15 where they all end up going.
Well, I like that a lot, and I think he should be the second quarterback as well because of what you see. I don't understand all this stuff, but that's why we have you on. We'll move on to another top prospect, I guess you could say, for Ohio State and defensive back Shaun Wade, kind of exposed in the semifinal and final this past year a little bit, maybe, or maybe that's just internet fodder.
No.
But what are your feelings on Shaun Wade?
I mean, you're definitely right about that. I mean, Ohio State fans agree with you on that. I mean, he did not have the year that he was expected to have at that outside quarterback spot. I mean, this was a guy who, was expected to make that move and be the best cornerback in the country. And it didn't happen. I mean, he was named as an All-American by a couple of media outlets, but the truth is he really didn't play up to that level all year. It was a struggle for him. And, there's a lot of things going on there. I mean, you're learning to play a new position in a year of COVID. He was battling multiple injuries, but I think his future is back at that slot cornerback spot where he played 2 years ago. I think he was a lot better at that spot than he was outside. And I think that's what NFL teams are going to look at him as a slot corner or as a safety. I think that's really where he belongs in the NFL. And I think right now he's probably in that third to fourth round range as a prospect. Going into the year, there was talk, he could be a first round pick, but I just don't think he had the kind of year that he needed to be that top pick in the draft.
It reminded me a little bit of A.J. Terrell getting smoked in the national championship. Still went in the second round. Had a pretty good rookie year. So it was kept ringing in my head every time I saw Wade in the playoff this year.
Well, and here's my take: you're going to get burned as a defensive back in college football these days with the rules. I mean, in the NFL too, it's going to happen. So one game or doesn't make a career and doesn't mean he's a good or a bad NFL player. So I wanted to ask you about a quarterback, Dan, because a non-Ohio State, non-Clemson quarterback, because Mac Jones to me is a statue. Now, I heard somebody say that he was more athletic than you thought, and maybe he is, but that still doesn't mean much to me. He looks like a statue. He's thrown to guys who are open by 3 yards or more. And I wonder if that's going to translate to the NFL. And I was wondering, somebody that's experienced like you looking at these college players and translating them to what they're going to be in the NFL. Am I missing it on Mac Jones? Is he a first-round draft pick? I think you just said the 5 quarterbacks are going to go in the first round, but help me on Mac Jones.
I think your concerns are very valid. I'm very on the fence with Mac Jones because of the reasons you said. I think we've seen it in recent years. We saw it, with a guy like Dwayne Haskins from Ohio State a couple of years ago, where these guys who don't have mobility, it really hurts them, in the NFL. Nowadays in the NFL, it seems like just about all the top quarterbacks are guys who can move around. And so I don't think Mac Jones is a great athlete by NFL standards. Like I said, might be a little more athletic than he looks, but he wasn't a guy who ran the ball a lot at Alabama, wasn't a guy who made a lot of plays outside the pocket at Alabama. Now, maybe he didn't have to, but that is the other concern, like you said, is if you can watch that game against Ohio State, for example, he played a fantastic game. I give him credit. He played a fantastic game on the biggest stage. But his receivers were wide open all the time. If you watch Trevor Lawrence play, if you watch Justin Fields play, if you watch Zach Wilson play, you're going to see a lot of examples on their film of them, fitting that ball into a really tight window to get it to a guy. You watch Mac Jones's film, you just don't see much of that because guys were running wide open so much that his numbers were great. But I absolutely have questions about, if you put him in an offense where the rest of the talent around him isn't way better than the defense that they're going against, can he continue to have that same kind of success? He's a guy that I look at where I think where he ends up could really dictate his success. I think if he goes to a team that's got a good offensive line and has good wide receivers, I think he can be successful. But if he's a guy who's going to have to create for himself behind a shaky offensive line and doesn't have great receivers, I think he'll struggle. To me, I kind of look at him as like an Alex Smith type quarterback maybe in the NFL, where I think, if he's on a good team, he can be an adequate starter, but I don't see him as a guy who's going to elevate a team and is going to make the team better all by himself.
One very famous podcaster on this podcast said that he's got terrible feet. That was me. I said it, but I have a hard time watching him, and I think it's valid that he's throwing to. I don't know if it's scheme. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's his talent, but his receivers are running wide open, and when his receivers aren't running wide open, Najee's coming out of the backfield. It reminded me, and I called him the poor man's Jake Coker at one point in the season this year, because he didn't have to do much. And what, like you said, his numbers were fantastic. He's very good, no question about it. But it brought up that question: are they system quarterbacks there in Alabama?
Yeah, I mean, I would definitely have concerns if I was a team investing a top 15 pick in Mac Jones. There's no doubt about it. Do I think somebody's going to do it based on what people are saying? My guess is somebody will, but I don't know that I would want to be that team making that decision, because I just don't know if the upside is there.
All right, our guest is Dan Hope of 11warriors.com. Casey, I think you had a question for Dan about some of the quarterbacks at the Senior Bowl.
Yeah, so I watched the Senior Bowl, and I was on a different podcast kind of talking about it, and I knew who was there, but I didn't know who was there. And then I watched the game, and did any quarterback at Senior Bowl, whether it was Ellinger, whether it was Ian Book, Felipe Franks, whoever else was there, did they do anything for their draft stock? Was that worth it for them? Jamie Newman?
Yeah, I think the one guy who I think has some upside that's interesting is Kellen Mond from Texas A&M. I think watching him in the Senior Bowl, I thought he played a good game, and I think he's a guy that is interesting to me as a middle round guy. Like, if you can get him in the middle rounds, he's a guy that's got some upside where, let's say it was between him and Ian Book, for example, I would draft a Kellen Mond, because I think Kellen Mond has the physical tools that if you can get the best out of him, there's a chance that he could develop into a starting caliber player in the future. Whereas an Ian Book, I look at and say, this guy's a career backup. He might play in the NFL for 10 years as a backup, but he's never going to be a franchise quarterback. He just doesn't have those physical tools. Now, I'll qualify that with Kellen Mond saying, there was a graphic out there today that had Kellen Mond ranked ahead of Justin Fields. I think that's patently ridiculous. I would not draft Kellen Mond in the first round. I don't think he played nearly well enough at Texas A&M to justify that. But he's a guy that, let's say, a fourth round, if you need a quarterback, he's a guy that would be intriguing to me as a guy that maybe you take a chance on and see what he can become.
What's going on with Texas A&M fans and Ohio State fans? There's something special going on there.
I think it's Ohio State fans and everybody else, right, Dan?
Yeah, pretty much.
Well, let me do my running joke on Kellen Mond that I always say. I've said it like 8 times throughout the year. He's great when they're behind 24-6. It's when they're close or ahead that he struggles a little bit, right? I mean, he got so much love for being down 24-3 to leading Texas A&M to 3 points in 3.5 quarters against Clemson. He got so much love for leading down the field to 1 touchdown at the end of a meeting, with the third string defense in there. It's just incredible. The guy does it every week. They're down by 20. He rallies them, gets a lot of credit, and goes out the next week and loses. So I'm not the biggest Kellen Mond fan in the world. So, all right, Dan, let's see. Anything else for Dan Hope? Any sleepers? Any names we should be aware of you think might just jump out and surprise the fans? Clemson, not Clemson. We've already talked about Clemson, Ohio State. Anybody across the nation? Who's our surprise guy on draft day?
Yeah, man, that's a good question. I probably should have thought about that one a little bit.
I probably should have told you we were going to ask.
Yeah, now I'm on the spot, like trying to rack my brain and think about it. But it's just like, man, I'm trying to think.
Who are you seeing maybe even Ohio State that we didn't mention? Obviously, we just mentioned the 2 top dogs. Give us somebody from Ohio State that may be a second or third day pick that we.
Yeah, I think one guy that's interesting would be Tommy Togiai, the nose tackle, because I think he was a guy that most people didn't expect to leave early and enter the NFL draft. And so I think, that's maybe why he hasn't gotten talked about a ton yet, is because I think a lot of people just thought he would come back for another year. But I think he'll end up being a day 2 draft pick. I think he had a really good year this past year. I think he's, a modern prototype of what you're looking for in a nose tackle. I think that's what he is, because, he's, 300-pound guy. I mean, everybody at Ohio State says he's the strongest guy on the team. I can't wait to see how much he benches at pro day, because I think it's going to be a lot, but he's also very quick. So he's a guy that I think is not getting enough attention right now among Ohio State's draft prospects, but is going to end up being a top 100 pick at the end of the day.
See, you did great.
Well, and another guy that you and I were emailing about before, I'd included him on the list. And now I did a little research, shockingly, and he's coming back to Ohio State. Chris Olave, what's the deal there? We were all surprised when Darion Kendrick returned, only to get booted. What's the deal with Olave coming back? I was sure he was going to be somebody who went out in the draft this year.
Yeah, that was a surprise too, because I think he would have been a first-round pick if he went in the draft, but he decided he wanted to come back for one more year, make one more run at trying to chase a championship. And I think he could be the best wide receiver in college football next year. And I think maybe he looks at it and said, maybe he looks at what Devontae Smith did this past year, a guy who probably would have been a late first-round pick if he went in the draft a year ago, comes back, wins the Heisman. Now he's going to be a top 5 pick. And you talked before about how deep this wide receiver draft class is. Chris Olave's got a chance now coming back. Maybe he can establish himself as that top wide receiver in next year's draft, and maybe he can be that top 10, top 15 pick. So, we'll see about that. That's it's hard when you're already as good as he is. It's hard to continue to build on top of that as a draft prospect. But, it's certainly great news for Ohio State, breaking in a new quarterback, to have him back and Garrett Wilson back and all these other young receivers they have. It's going to be fun to watch that receiving corps this year.
I was going to say that's a heck of a receiving room that Ohio State guys. But before you go, Dan, before we let you go, what do you got going on at 11warriors.com and beyond?
Yeah, we've got, all kinds of stuff, spring football coming up in a couple weeks. So we're starting to preview that. I've been writing some about the quarterback battle that's going to be coming up and the guys that are competing for that job, and lots of basketball coverage too, because Ohio State's basketball team has been pretty good this year, and getting ready for the NCAA tournament. So going to be plenty of stuff coming up here next couple months. Certainly NFL draft coverage as well as we get closer to that time.
I have one more question for you. And I promise we'll let you go, Dan, so you can get to the job that actually pays you, so you can eat and drink. Quinn Ewers, Cade Klubnik, okay? Ewers to Ohio State, number 1 ranked overall player. Klubnik to Clemson. What do you see in those two guys? Just kind of in general. I don't expect any in-depth. To me, my naive opinion is Ewers looks more advanced. I know Klubnik. I watched the state championship game. Klubnik ran circles around his team, Ewers' team, but I think it's the team more than the player is my initial reaction. Westlake went through the season. They outscored their opponents something like 707 to 106 or something like that, right? So I think the team was a lot better. Ewers looks more advanced to me. That's my first take.
Yeah, Ewers is the number 1 overall prospect in the country for a reason. He's gotten the comparisons to Trevor Lawrence, that's a very lofty comparison to make for a high school kid, but that's how highly regarded he is as a prospect. So, I think certainly you look at Quinn Ewers, the way he throws the ball, you just don't see many high school juniors throwing the football the way he does. So, his potential's through the roof. But, really, I think that game that you talked about, it seemed like from there, Klubnik's recruitment really skyrocketed, because I hadn't really heard a whole lot about him before that game. And then all of a sudden, this wave of offers came in, and, certainly, obviously, Clemson had started building that relationship with him, well before that. And that was where he wanted to go, because he committed pretty quick once he got that Clemson offer. But, it makes for a fun subplot if they meet in the Texas high school playoffs next year, or if they eventually meet in the college football playoff. I'm sure one way or another we'll be talking about how they played each other in high school.
Well, and he moved up 106 spots between the championship game and the last re-ranking, but there's nowhere for Ewers to go, right? What's he going to do? He can't move up anywhere. I watched them both. Think they're both going to be fantastic college quarterbacks for what that's worth, my opinion. Just different kind of players it looked like to me. So, Dan, as always, we appreciate your time, and I'm sure we'll be back with you in 3-4 months. We'll ask you for some more incredible information. Thank you so much.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me, guys.
Dan. Appreciate
All
you.
right. Dan Hope, 11warriors.com. And
good,
Casey,
man.
that was fantastic.
Yeah,
That
he
was
knows his stuff.
fantastic.
He knows his stuff. He's a good guy. He's just, it's great.
Yeah, he's always willing. And one thing I told him when he got let go from orangeandwhite.com, they all did, by the way. I told him that it really came across how much he loved his job, right? And you can tell it from then. I'll go on your podcast and talk football. I don't care. I'll talk Ohio State, Clemson, NFL, whatever you want to talk, I'll talk it. Just a great guy.
Yeah.
No doubt. And speaking of great guys, our next guest up, Mr. JP Priester from allclemson.com. JP, how's it hanging tonight?
I'm all right, man. Y'all don't need to be having me behind somebody as smart as Dan Hope, man.
He said, hey, man, he just loves football. He loves to talk, and you two guys are a lot alike. I mean, you'll come on the Rinky Dink podcast and talk football to us and put up with our complete and utter nonsense.
Yeah,
right.
he's a pretty knowledgeable fella, man.
Yeah, done a lot of work, and most people that watch this is going to know him, as I said earlier, from orangeandwhite.com, but he's been at the Bleacher Report. He worked at a Buffalo Bills site, NFL Draft. He graduated from Ohio State and now works for Ohio State. A lot of general knowledge. All right, JP, we don't talk to you about some football, not just football, though. Baseball, maybe a little basketball, though. Casey and I already kind of cried over that debacle.
That was brutal, man. That team just does not play well on the road. I don't know what it is, but I mean, they just do not play well on the road at all.
I said to Marty, when Clemson's bad, they leave no doubt.
That first half might have been their worst half of basketball this year, and that's saying a lot. Going back to some of those games, those blowout games right after that first pause, man. That's saying a lot. That was an ugly half of basketball in that first half.
Well, my Twitter joke was the first 1 to 21 was going to win because there was a lot of bricks being laid out there.
I thought they had found it for just a few minutes in that second half, but man, that didn't last long at all.
Yeah, they started hitting some shots. At one point, I think they dipped right below 20% shooting right after half.
They did what you can't do against that zone and just settle for three-pointers all day long, especially when you're not making them, man. You can't do that against that zone. I know Syracuse is tough to beat at home. They've only lost one game all year there, I think. Heck, I think Clemson was the underdog going into that game, if I'm not mistaken.
They were 3 points.
Yeah. If we're going to be brutally honest, man, you're a tournament team. You got to go win that game on the road. That's a game you need to win. I mean, it was not saying that was a must-win game for them because it wasn't, because they're firmly in the tournament right now. It was more of a must-win game for Syracuse, but I don't know, just for perception's sake, that's a game you need to go win, man, especially when you've struggled on the road. That's a game you need to go win, especially when you just dominated that team at home 2 weeks ago.
Exactly.
Well, you can kiss that 4 seed goodbye. That's what that means to me. I mean,
oh yeah,
you're gonna have to beat Pittsburgh by 200 to make up for that what we saw today. Okay, JP. Before we start talking about Clemson, because we got a bunch of stuff to talk about. Eric Gilbert, transfer portal, our favorite subject that we love so much. My saying earlier in the week was he double portaled them, right? He portaled the portal. He never even went to class at Florida. He's transferring to Florida from LSU. Never even went to class, is my understanding. And now he says he's transferring out. This is kind of the worst of what people are worried about, the transfer portal. And my other joke on Twitter, I've been making a lot of Twitter jokes and haven't been going over very well, is, I said a live look at the transfer portal. I had like 1 million people in there. I follow this account on the College Sports Network that I think puts everybody, when somebody enters the transfer portal, they do a tweet, and I think there's 15 a day.
No, I bet.
It is crazy. These guys are giving up scholarships now. They're not guaranteed anything. They're giving up their scholarship, and a lot of them aren't going to find homes. There's a lot of unintended consequences to this. I'm all for players leaving because, as I said, if I'm Joe Blow's student, nobody cares if Marty Coleman transfers from Clemson to the College, Charleston, or wherever. because I'm not a skilled football player, but there's a lot of unintended consequences to this transfer portal stuff.
Yeah, they've kind of opened Pandora's box here, and Arik Gilbert's a perfect example. You know, a player like him, he's not going to have a problem finding a home. But how many guys have we seen like him? Maybe not enter the portal twice within a month, but go to one school, transfer, and then transfer from that school to another school, and end up at 3 different schools since the invention of the portal. I mean, it's just opened the Pandora's box. I don't know how you stop it, but I don't think he's going to have any trouble finding a home. Somebody told me Florida's check bounced. I don't know how to do
that. All right.
Well, I heard the leader. I heard the leader in the room for him is Georgia.
Yeah, so that wouldn't surprise. Hey, God, where's he from? I forget off the top. Georgia, right? He's from Georgia, right? Yeah. I was told he left. He wanted to leave LSU because he was homesick. So I mean, if you're homesick, why are you going to go to Florida? Why not just skip that step altogether and just go on to Georgia? Because I think that's where he's going to end up.
I heard one serious, semi-serious take was that Florida actually required some kind of academic. I don't know. Basically, LSU could get him in easily. Oh. Florida actually required some academic work, and he didn't meet those standards, and they basically told him, "We can't take you." Thanks for.
I can absolutely believe that.
So it sounds like Georgia would be the right fit.
He'd be the perfect fit if that was the case.
All right, Jason. Jason Priester, allclemson.com. Let's talk some Clemson now. I think that's why most of the folks watch this show. We try to talk about everybody, but we always circle back to Clemson. The news, a couple of things. Let's start out with the bad news of the week, depending on your point of view. Darion Kendrick no longer with the team. Tell us what you know about that and what that means for the Clemson defensive backfield in 2021.
Well, I mean, anybody that's followed Kendrick's career shouldn't be too shocked that he was kicked off the team. I mean, he's had an up and down career, especially last year. How it affects the team, if we're talking about the player from 2019, if Clemson was going to get that guy this year, that's a plus. That Kendrick, that's an elite level cornerback. But if they were going to get the cornerback that we saw last year, I don't think it's that too big of a loss that they can't overcome it. They got some talented guys at corner. They're not real deep there now, but there's still some talent there. Got some, some former 5-star guys still there. Fred Davis, Andrew Booth. Then you got Mario Goodrich. I think if he could stay healthy, could see a lot of time on the field this year. And with Kendrick's departure, I could see Malcolm Green maybe moving back out to the outside some. And I really like him. He might end up being one of the best corners of the bunch.
Let me ask you this too. Was this one of those things that DK probably went to Dabo's office and Dabo said, you probably need to go out and say that I'm leaving the team because you're not welcome back here. So technically he was dismissed, but he also wanted to save Kendrick some embarrassment. I know it's come out that he's been dismissed, but it almost said he's no longer with the team. Was this one of those things that like Dabo kind of said, do it yourself? You're not here anymore? I
think that's always going to be mostly the route he takes. He's never going to want to embarrass his players. I think everybody knows what happened. The reason, what the last straw was, everybody can speculate. You can listen to the rumors or whatever. I'm not even going to get into all that. It doesn't really matter. He knew when he announced he was coming back that there was a set of guidelines he was going to have to follow if he wanted to stay on the team all season. And for whatever reason, he wasn't able to do that. And he didn't even make it to spring practice. In hindsight, he probably should have entered a draft, whether he was, whether his draft stock was lower than what he thought it was going to be or whatever. He just doesn't sound like a guy that's cut out for the structure of a Power 5 major college football program. There's a lot of structure inside those programs. And I don't know, to me, he just sounds like a guy, one of those guys that's not really cut out for that.
Well, and Clemson's got more structure than your average
absolutely
Power 5 D1 team. So next question up, or next topic, Justin Ross at the slot. Now, heard all kinds of stuff. I heard a range on this to, wow, that's crazy. That's great. And, well, he's already played the slot or he's not going to play the slot. I don't care what Dabo says. Tell me the truth. I've heard it all on this.
I think the truth probably lies somewhere in the middle. Even Tony Elliott said today that he was going to start out there, but he would move everywhere. He was going to play all over. They weren't going to he wasn't going to be assigned to just one spot on the field. So, we saw Justin Ross play the slot, in his freshman season beside T. Higgins, quite a bit, to get both those guys on the field, and he was pretty successful at it. And Tony Elliott was pretty clear about it today. And I think Dabo made the reference too, reference Derek Hamilton, that Justin Ross playing in the slot is just like Derek Hamilton playing in the slot. Very similar set of skill set there. Ross is probably even more talented, but there's a lot of different things you can do with Ross in the slot. I think the main thing though is if you put him there, it gets your three best receivers on the field, and I think that's the goal.
Yeah, it felt like that's the point of this whole thing, is to get him there. And actually, if you're working him at the slot, then he's going to be fluent in that position. That you can, if you want to put Ladson, on the outside, you want Justin Ross. I think that is lost in some of the internet fodder and the Twitter fodder that we see. That, oh my God, he's going to stay there. I'm not sure he's going to stay there because we saw with Devonta Smith, right? I mean, they put him anywhere to get him the ball, and let's hope Ross is healthy first and foremost, but second of all, he's going to get the ball no matter where he is if he's fully healthy playing. If we're being honest,
I fully expect to see him lined up in every position, every receiver spot on the field at one point or another throughout the season. I don't have any doubt about that. He's not going to be just in the slot. I don't believe that one bit. He's too good to just single out for the slot. I mean, he can play all three positions and he can play them well.
Well,
and then you can't have if there's a DB, if there's a shutdown DB from somewhere, you're going to move him. So he's going to not get he's not going to get those double teams, or
that's right.
He's going to. It feels like they took a page out of Sark's book, or make sure that you put your best players in the best positions to be successful.
I remember last year after the LSU loss, I remember Tony Elliott saying he was going to do some self-evaluating, that he thought that teams were starting to pick up on some tendencies and stuff, and he wanted to make some tweaks to the offense. I can't remember exactly how he worded it, but I think they never got to that point last year. This is just my opinion. I think the shutdown probably put a damper on those plans, and I think we're going to see some tweaks to the offense this year, and them talking about lining up Justin Ross in the slot is just one of those things. I a part of that. I think there's going to be it's not going to be an overhaul of the offense. That's not what I'm saying at all. Just some tweaks, to try to cover up some tendencies that they may have developed over the years, and they maybe develop the route tree a little bit more or something like that. Just small things, and I think Ross, lining up in the slot's just a small part of that.
Cool. So maybe hopefully a return to wide receiver U, which, due to injuries last year, seemed to be lacking a little bit. I'm still I'm still a guy that wants to see the freshman do it before I buy into wide receiver U. So do you have anything else, any news from spring practice that you can share with us, that updates for the folks out there listening?
One of the biggest things I've heard that I liked, I heard Dabo Sweeney say the other day that Nolan Turner and James Skowski, neither one are going to take any live reps this year. They're doing all the, the one-on-one work and all that stuff. But when it comes to live reps, they're going to let all the younger guys get those reps. And to me, those guys need all the reps they can get. Turner, Skowski, they don't need those reps. There's, experienced as you can get. Those are six-year guys. I think that's an excellent idea. Those guys behind them need those reps. As far as any news or anything, man, they keep that kind of stuff locked down like Fort Knox, man. They ain't much come out that they don't want to come out.
I was going to say Skalski and Turner have been there longer than Casey was there as an undergraduate. So
it's true.
All right, Jason Priester, allclemson.com. Great work, Jason, and shares his stuff on in our Facebook group, which is really, really, we really appreciate that, Jason. You keep that place humming, keep the conversation going. You respond to anybody who dares question your take in the Facebook group, and I say that jokingly.
Hey, man,
A lot of fun.
I've been wrong before. I'll be wrong again.
No doubt. And you're wrong. We're going to talk recruiting now. Ty Simpson, let's start out there. Ty Simpson chose Alabama after, it was believed that Clemson was a leader for a long time. Then it started coming out, Alabama. He ended up choosing Alabama, which, led to an offer for Cade Klubnik of Westlake High School here in the Austin area, who committed to Clemson like 2 days later, right? I think it was 2 days after the offer, I believe.
Probably a little bit quicker than that.
Yeah.
Brad's article had it.
If I read right, he was ready to commit when they made the offer, but Dabo's usually take your time, think about this kind of guy.
I got a feeling all they were waiting on was that video to get made.
Okay. So we've talked about this before, and we just talked to Dan Hope, who Ohio State graduate now, works for Ohio State site. They've Quinn Ewers, number one player in the nation, obviously the number one quarterback, committed to Ohio State. What I shared with Dan is that at this point in their career, it just looks like Ewers is more developed. Simpson too, for that matter. Not saying that Klubnik's not going to get there. Klubnik outplayed Ewers in the state championship game. I watched that on TV, but I don't know how much of that was the teams around them, right? Klubnik's team outscored, and I was going to pull it up for the show, and I forgot to do it. They outscored their opponents literally like 707 to 156 in 6A Texas football in a conference with Lake Travis, which is Chad's old school, and Baker Mayfield's old school. And my son's high school made it to the state semifinals. Westlake beat them 59-6. That's the kind of dominance his team shows. So I don't know how much of it was Klubnik, how much is the team around him, but I feel much better as a Clemson fan with Klubnik on the Clemson team in 2023, even in a reserve role. 2022, I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's a lot to like about this kid, man. And a lot of people, I've seen a lot of chatter online about him being the second choice and all that. And really, I don't think that's what this was. I know on the surface, it kind of looks like that. I think this was more of a case of where Clemson got in with Ty Simpson earlier than they did with Klubnik. So they were going to give Simpson, the opportunity to make that decision, and they were going to wait and see what he was going to do. And they were very upfront and transparent throughout the whole process with Klubnik. That's why the offer took so long to come. They had enough respect for Simpson to let him make his decision. And I think that's one of the things that makes Clemson's recruiting pitch so unique. A lot of programs won't do that. But and then once it was realized he was going to go to Alabama, Clemson offered. I talked to Cade Klubnik Sunday, and he told me that Dabo Swinney had called him about an hour before Simpson's announcement and offered him. So I don't think this was like their second choice. I think this was more like a 1A and 1B type deal, and they just got in on Simpson a little bit earlier than they did Klubnik.
You kind of
there's a lot. Go ahead. Sorry.
I was just gonna say you kind of teased that they were waiting for the video. There is rumor that he pretty much committed on the spot to Dabo.
Yeah, I've heard that too. I don't know that for a fact, but I've been told that he committed that day, and I just assumed they was waiting on the video for the announcement. I mean, he flat out told me Sunday, a couple of days. So I mean, I knew it was coming. I didn't think Tuesday, but I knew it was coming this week. But
it kind of snuck up on us too. There's a lot of guys that do the big pomp and circumstance kind of thing. And I think it was Anna Hickey that tweeted something out, and it just kind of caught my eye. I think I was going to bed.
It was kind of late yesterday.
It was kind of late, and I was like, whoa, hold on a second.
I love the video he did, man. I thought it was awesome. He self-narrated himself in the way. I thought it was a great video, but
really well done.
Well,
as far as the player Clemson's getting, man, there's a lot to like about him. He's not as developed, and he's not the elite talent of a Trevor Lawrence or Deshaun Watson. Make no mistake, he's not that. And he's very accurate. He's very accurate throwing on the run. He's very comfortable outside the pocket. He's good with his ball placement, especially for a quarterback at his age. And he throws a very catchable ball. I have some questions about his overall arm strength. I noticed some of his deep balls die off when they get down the field, and some of his throws to the outside don't have quite that zip on them that you'd like to see. But he's still, going into his senior season, he only weighs 185 pounds. So once he gets into the weight room, adds about 20, 25 more pounds, that could be something that's not even talked about a year from now. He's liable to add a lot more arm strength. But the only negative I see with him, he needs to work on his footwork some. But the kid's a winner, man, and I think he's the perfect fit for Clemson's offensive scheme.
Yeah, well, and I think he's a perfect fit for the culture too. Just knowing that Westlake program as I do. Again, I live in the area. Knowing the kind of kids they produce, and as I said 3 or 4 times, the pedigree from that school. Name another high school that has 2 Super Bowl MVP quarterbacks in their alumni, not to mention one of the best kickers in Justin Tucker. Just an incredible pedigree, and that's not even counting Sam Ellinger. So that's the kind of guy you're getting. That's the kind of quality kid Clemson's got with Cade Klubnik. So I'm happy. I'm the one who's been standing up saying, hey, the quarterback depth, we need somebody. We need somebody. So
too bad he can't get here now because
no doubt. What I was saying was, if he turns out to be a Chase Bryce, I'll be perfectly happy with that because they're really thin at that quarterback position.
Yeah, people want to compare him to Watson or Lawrence. He don't have to be that. He don't have to be that generational type talent. Not every quarterback's got to be that guy. Clemson's got enough talent around those quarterbacks that they can win without a generational type quarterback.
Yeah. Well, as we talked about, it's not the same as when the talent level's not the same when Deshaun Watson came here and had to pass and run and do everything and dive over South Carolina players to score touchdowns. It's not like that anymore. Talent level is much higher right now at Clemson.
Yeah, I'll take a Cole Stout style. That's fine with the talent around him and the Cole Stout type quarterback. Yeah, I'm extremely excited about this kid.
Not the Cole Stout versus Georgia Tech, though.
No.
The Cole Stout after Brandon Streeter got to campus.
There you go. All right, guys. We already talked a little Clemson basketball. Oh, forgot one guy on the recruiting. Jalon Walker, linebacker out of North Carolina, going to commit at the end of the month. Has Max Fentz been solidified, or is Dabo going to, I don't know, what metaphor can I use? Jump over Max Fentz, or what do you think on this guy? I'm hearing Clemson.
That's what I'm hearing too, man. That's what I've heard the latest I've heard anyways, but we still 3 weeks away, and when we was 3 weeks away from Ty Simpson, I was hearing Clemson then too. So you never know with this recruiting stuff anymore, man. It changes on a whim.
So true. So true. And the kids like to do the fake outs.
They do like to do that too, slow up them smoke signals. But I have heard Clemson, and he would be a solid pickup, man. He's a top 50 overall guy. I think he's the number 4 inside linebacker in the country, like the second best player in the state of North Carolina. So he would definitely be a solid pickup, no doubt about it.
All right,
he's the next guy to watch on the commitment trail for sure.
Cool. We've already talked a little bit of basketball, and we won't rehash that. We'll revisit basketball next time we have you on, JP. Let's go to Clemson baseball. A couple of tough losses in South Carolina. I tried to talk Casey off the ledge, but he's leaning over. And you missed it earlier. Casey said there's no one in the Clemson lineup that scares him. Let me show you something.
We are really digging back into the old time. There's a drive, center field. It is gone, and the Tigers take the lead at 4-3. Caden Grice, home run number 2 on the day.
Well, he's got one to right and one to center. We'll see if his next time up he can hit one to left. It hasn't taken long for him to have a 2 home run game. It's his 5th career game.
That ball just landed in Seneca.
That's not fair. That's not fair.
Now, I know that was against East Tennessee State, not South Carolina, but no, I tend to agree, but I have bigger problems with the team than no one scaring me at the plate. I think he's going to be a fine hitter, and James Parker's got off to a hot start, and I think he can be a good hitter too. My questions are, as we talked about a couple of weeks ago, base running and
the little things.
The little things, tagging up, base running, and communicating on the field. We had drop pop-ups and, not sure who's doing what out there sometimes. And I don't know. I'm not too sure about the infield defense either. And they're not bad. They're just not – I don't think they're
great.
Elite. Yeah, they're not great. I was going to say elite, but that's a good word. Great's a good word. To me, the most important position on defense in a college baseball team is first base. Right. Think how many errors Rudy Cox saved over at first. I mean,
he was fantastic with that
20,
glove, man.
30. Now, the guys that Clemson has, Hawkins and Grice, not bad. They're not bad at all, but I don't think it's the same. And the footwork around second base doesn't look the same to me. They're not errors. It's one of those things where you don't see the errors in the box score, but you see the lost outs, I guess is what I'm saying.
No, go ahead. I was gonna say I tend to agree, man. I've seen a lot of mistakes on the base paths. Guys not. I can think off the top of my head 2 drop pop ups that infielders tried to catch that outfielder should have caught them off and caught the ball. Definitely some stuff with what you talking about there at first base. Davis Sharp, Caden Grice, and Hawkins. They're not the defensive first baseman that Andrew Cox was. There's no doubt about that, man. He was fantastic over there. But this team has got to get better at doing the little things that wins baseball games. And there really isn't a guy in the lineup that really scares you. Not currently. I think Grice could develop into that guy, but right here as we sit here today, I don't think nobody's shying away from him. I think there's not a guy in that lineup that pitchers wouldn't come after. Grice is going to be a guy that strikes out a lot no matter what. But this Clemson baseball team's just got to get better at doing the little things. And I think the pitching, I've said it plenty of times. I think the pitching is really good. I got questions about how some of them were used over the weekend, but that's not my decision. But I don't understand. When you come in and take Olenchuk out there, I get why. I thought he was starting to leave some balls up, but if you're going to bring in a guy, why are you going to bring in left-handed Matt Clark against 3 straight right-handers? One of them being Wes Clark. That's one thing I didn't understand, but minor league gets paid a lot more money than I do to make those jobs, and he make those calls. He's a lot better at it than I am. It's easy to sit here and quarterback in hindsight,
Well, you were 100% right, though. You don't worry about the arms. You really don't. Every guy that they run out there, regardless. Even Evan Estridge, who took the loss, I guess, on Sunday. Yeah. Was it Sunday?
That was another one. I know he's raved about Estridge all camp. That he been one of the most consistent strike throwers. But is that the guy you want on the mound in the 9th inning? I don't know.
But the thing that I was going back to you don't have a Seth Beer, and then you don't have. There's always somebody in the Clemson lineup that you don't want up. Even right. going back to my time and a little bit afterwards, even like a guy like Herman Demink, who was a leadoff guy, you knew was going to get a hit when they were second and third and 1 out, or at least put the ball in play. My big issue, and I like this team, so I'm going to caveat it with that. I like this team. You don't have a table setter like a Brady Allen. He scares the bejesus out of me because he's going to swing on the first pitch from South Carolina, the leadoff hitter. He's going to swing on the first pitch. He's going to make contact, and he's going to get on base. And there you go. Now you got man on first, nobody out, and you got 2, 3, 4 coming up, and all of those guys scared me. After that, it wasn't so much. I wasn't scared. Maybe it's the fact that I am a fan of Clemson that I'm not scared of these guys, but they're not doing anything outside. In my opinion, this is my opinion only. Outside of Dylan Brewer, I haven't seen great at bats. I think Dylan Brewer gives fantastic at bats every time.
I'm a big Dylan Brewer fan. He's a baseball player.
Oh, my God. He is a Jack Leggett type. I know Clemson fans are going to hate hearing that, but he's a Jack Leggett type. He's a guy that's going to dive all over the field. He's going to steal bases. He's going to play fundamentally sound. His at bats are Monty Lee at bats, which Monty talks about all the time, getting good at bats, getting your swings in your zone, yada yada yada. You hear it all the time. I'm a huge Dylan Brewer fan. I just don't see those at bats in some of the other guys. French had one last night, I think,
and you know, French is kind of banged up. You know, he's been hurt ever since he pulled up in that South Carolina game, and he's the only catcher healthy right now. So they have him to play. I think that's a big part of why they had him bunt late in that game the other day. They didn't want him running the bases.
He looked. I think he was backing up first last night or yesterday afternoon, and he looked like he was hurting still. Just kind of jogged to the ball to throw the guy out at first.
That's another thing. There's a lot of guys injured, man. They need to get some of these guys back. You know, it's like Adam Hackenberg. That's a guy that could hurt some teams at the plate, and you know he's good defensively. But I do think they're going to get the freshman catcher back this weekend. I think Monty Lee said that today or yesterday, maybe. Cooper Engel.
You know, who did have good at bats last night, especially his later at bats, was Kier Meredith. I thought he was good at the plate too.
He absolutely needs to be in the lineup. He's had trouble staying healthy. I thought he was on his way to having a great season last year, and it looked like he was going to stay healthy. But he started off the season banged up this season. But they need him in the lineup. They need him at the top of that lineup to set the plate and make things happen. No doubt about it. He can do a lot of things, man. He's got a lot of speed. He gets on base. You know, he's dangerous.
They need to put him in a Michelin suit, right? Because he got hit. He's played one game. He leads the team in hit by pitch. The guy, I think it's Fred Cunningham on the broadcast yesterday, said he's played 40 games and been hit by 16 pitches.
Yeah, it's like the ball just gravitates to him when he's in the batter's box. I don't know what it is because he gets hit a lot.
I took it. My takeaway from the South Carolina series was kind of what Casey said. He said nobody scares you, but there was no pressure on South Carolina pitchers. Now, they're very good, whether there's 1, 2, 3, or nobody on base. Don't get me wrong, but there was no pressure. There was just easy outs, strikeouts, a lot of strikeouts, but a lot of easy outs also. There was nothing in the gap. There was nothing, anywhere that – and if there was nobody on base, so there was no pressure on those South Carolina pitchers. A couple of stats here. So far through the first 6 games, Clemson's batting .221 with 2 outs, .271 with runners on, .269 with runners in scoring position. They're having here's a weird thing. They're batting .436 leading off an inning, but they were 0 for 8 last night against East Tennessee. So before that, they were over 500 leading off an inning, but they're still 3-2 and just couldn't beat South Carolina. I don't know. Something is missing, as JP said.
Situational hitting's not very good with this team, and it hasn't been under Monty Lee. I don't think it's just Clemson and Monty Lee. I think it's something that we're starting to see across baseball, college baseball, especially as a whole, especially with younger head coaches. And this one thing I hate about the analytics. It's all about driving the ball, man. Bunting is a wasted out, so it's becoming a lost start. Teams aren't even practicing anymore. And there's sometimes, man, you need to bunt the ball. And that's just something we don't see much out of this Clemson team under Monty Lee. He just doesn't believe in wasting outs. He wants them to drive that ball.
Well, you saw it a couple times in the South Carolina series, or in the series before.
They have bunted a little bit more this year.
They tried, and they've not been able to. I think
bunting with Teodosio is not a great idea, man. He has shown during his career he is not good at it.
And that's a guy that should be.
Forte. Yeah, I mean, I'm not a coach, and I haven't coached baseball in 20 years, but it just seems like it's something that doesn't get coached. Bunting just doesn't get coached very much anymore by the looks of it, because most guys just aren't very good at it. I mean, watching I can't even remember who it was now. Watching him trying to bunt the other day, and he's just stabbing at the ball. Was it French?
Yeah.
Yeah, it looked like he had never attempted to bunt in his life.
He turned around when it was 2 strikes, and you can just tell Monty said, "Yeah, do it again."
I fully believe them wanting him to bunt had more to do with them not wanting to have him run the bases, because that was the same game when he pulled up with that, whatever's wrong with him.
Well, apparently that's the way to do it. They'll stop that running the bases anyway.
If you strike out, you don't have to run them.
That's what
All
Cunningham said. Cunningham said that last night. Sorry, Marty. That's why they put Grice behind him because he didn't have to run the bases.
Yeah. Hopefully they'll get Engel back this weekend, and that'll take some of the pressure off him because, I like French. When he's healthy, he's not that guy that's going to scare the bejesus out of you like a Seth Beer, but he's a guy that can help your ball club. He can hit the ball. He can hit some home runs for you. He's got gap power. He's a good baseball player, and he's shown when he's healthy, he's pretty good defensively too back there.
Pretty solid. He is pretty solid both on the field and he's built pretty solid too.
Yeah, I was very disappointed last year when he was hurt and we didn't get to see him any last year. I was very disappointed when I found out he was going to be hurt. He was one of the guys I was most looking forward to playing. Him and Carter Ratfield.
So 5'10", 210, I think is what they said.
Oh yeah, he's a stock. He's built, man. He's not like 6'3", 6'4", but man, he's a big guy.
All right, let's talk about somebody who's had a little bit more success. The old softball team's 8-2, swept Elon. And Casey, you've got some stats you said this week.
Well, I just printed out their stats because I wanted to get their names right last week. I completely botched all of them, but yeah, they look good. They're 8-2. They swept Elon. Didn't give up a run this past weekend, which was really good to see. John Rittman has a heck of a staff for heck of a team for year 2.
Nice. No doubt, man. They definitely hired the right guy to start off that program, man, because they have started off on fire. They picked up right where they left off last year. I'll admit I don't know a whole heck of a lot about the softball team. I'm familiar with a few of the players, and I've watched a couple of games, but it's hard to do baseball and softball at the same time. But
absolutely.
The Cagle girl, man, she's just as impressive as anybody I've ever seen, man. She's a gamer, man.
One of the things I see from Clemson folks they're so surprised that Valerie Cagle has 7 starts in 11 games.
Yeah.
Well, some of these teams that are Oklahoma States or the teams that are always highly ranked, Florida State, they run out the same girl
all the time.
Game. Yeah,
softball's a different animal, man. It's not like baseball.
That's a natural motion is underhand. They'll have 30.
She's good, man. She's fantastic. I watched her pitch live last year one game, man. She is fantastic. She's good. She's a good player.
It's a lot of fun, and the games move fast. And there's the Clemson players. Marissa Jimbarda, man, is something else to watch at the plate. She's already got 5 home runs on the year.
She's got some pop in that bat.
and those balls are tough to hit too. If you ever face
softball is fun to watch, man. If you ever up in Clemson, you get a chance to go to a softball game, I highly recommend it. They're high energy. It's different than baseball. It's very high energy, man. They get into it.
The girls chant. They all have chants when it's
very fun.
I like.
Well, they've obviously improved the sport because I remember watching 20 years ago or so, and it was 1-0 every game or 2-1. There was no run scored anywhere. I think they did something with the mound or moved it back or something that changed the game.
And the balls too. They've kind of given the balls
okay.
a little bit more pop too over the last few years. Whereas in baseball, they're deadening the balls. They're kind of giving the softballs a little bit more pop.
All right, coming this weekend, fellas, we got what? We got basketball at Pittsburgh.
Home against Pittsburgh.
Home
finale.
Did you get a ticket? Because put it out there tonight.
I need a ticket. I need a ticket to that game. Anybody's got one, man. I need a ticket for my wife.
All right. JP needs a ticket. If I had one, I'd give it to you.
Me too.
Basketball home against Pittsburgh. Baseball home against Notre Dame, correct?
Yes, home against Notre Dame. But, hey, if she don't get one, that's all right, too.
That was JP Priester, ex-husband.
It won't kill her, man. I promise you.
All right, JP, thank you as always for your time, man. We keep you late into the night. We appreciate you. We always enjoy having you on, getting your opinion on all this, information on Club Nick and spring practice. Appreciate you. Appreciate for what you do for the Facebook group. Thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Anytime, man. I appreciate y'all having me on. All you got to do is ask.
We will, man. We will. Have a good one.
All right, man.
Thanks,
see y'all later.
All right. What a great night, Casey. Dan Hope and JP Priester. A little bit longer show than usual, but hey, lots of information, lots of stuff going on. It's that time of year where you got spring football, basketball, baseball, and then we have softball to talk about. So we got 4 sports. Next thing you know, we'll be talking swimming and diving or something.
Well, no, I was going to bring it up, but we are going long. But Clemson soccer, both men and women, are this year they're doing a spring season, and the men are ranked first in the country, and the women are, I believe, third. So soccer is always a really strong sport at Clemson. We're not going to go in depth with them. I do follow it, but we're not going to go in depth with it here.
Hey, low key, that was one of the cool things to do when I was at Clemson. They were one of the top teams in the nation, won the national championship one year. But, honestly, the reason why it was one of the cool things to do was because the field was on the way downtown, right? So you could stop by soccer game, and you were like 3/4 of the way downtown, right? So you just take a few more steps, and there you are. So
yeah, very, very true. Very.
Hey,
very true. I was a season ticket holder when I lived down there. That's right. They do have season tickets. You too could be a season ticket holder for $40.
Hey, that's cool. Nothing wrong with that. Hey, are you and the guys getting together for the chopping beef tomorrow?
We are. Yeah, last week took a little personal week. This week we're back, and we got some topics. And if you're looking for sports talk, tomorrow's not the episode to tune into the chopping beef. I know that's not good for me to tell people, but yeah, no, we got a lot of good topics, a lot of off-color topics, and some experiences that I dealt with last week. So we're gonna have fun tomorrow. We're excited to be back. We all need it a little bit. We all had some personal stuff going on, not negative, but just some stuff going on. So it's going to be a good outlet for us.
Well, I was looking forward to it until you just told me.
You'll text us. I'm sure you're going to text us after this one.
Okay. I remember the time.
Yeah, my visions are always a little bit. I have delusions of grandeur sometimes. Like in my mind, this is great topics, but it's whether or not the boys go along with me. So we'll see.
Like I said before, it's always like there's a little bit of Jeff in me, a little bit of Beef, a little bit of Zach too. I can't say I've shared all of the.
I hope not.
All of the stuff you guys have done, but there's a little bit of me. It's like, that reminds me of the time I did this. That was really stupid.
Let's just say my mom listens to this show. She doesn't listen to that show anymore.
Oh,
and I
got
think that's
good. Understand completely. Hey, how about give the shout outs while I find the exit here?
Very cool. Thank you so much to everyone. We really appreciate JP Priester for joining us. We appreciate Dan Hope. They always bring great insight, and they truly are great people for just coming on with us. Thanks to everyone in the Facebook group, especially Nelson Wilhite, for all his help running the show and the support. Everyone on Seldom Used Reserve, Sluggo Podcast, and Chop and Beef, which does record tomorrow. Each and everyone who listens, likes, and shares. On behalf of Marty, Seldom Used Reserve Coleman, I am Casey the Beef Cregan. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you next week.
I don't remember what the ACC network was selling today, but it was the support hose, I think. So
Copperfit.
That's what I need.
I think we're done here.